Classic smooth Keith Williams transition there, boys and girls. Hey, everybody, how you doing? I get this camera set up. There we go. It's good to see everybody in the feed there. Scott Bogfoot from Newfoundland there. I'm always wondering how Scott's weather is. Hey, 5 Watt World Live is brought to you with the support of Ish Guitars. More about Ish later in the stream. You guys heard me talking about them all the time. Music over the intro today. Some of you might have recognized that. That's from my very good friend, John Cordy, whose recent video on trying to create the clean tones of a 2-rock amp using an HX Stomp is part of what motivated this, along with a conversation I had with Jeff, who is in, Mr. McErlain. McErlain is in the green room. There, maybe I should have a drink. Take a drink of water here. Okay. I already put the link to John's video on the 2-rock HX Stomp stuff there. If you don't watch John, you should be watching John. I thought it was the perfect theme for today as John did the video. He had gone to see a good friend of his, Jake Loosemore, playing a gig, and Jake was using a 2-rock, I think a signature clean and a Fender Vibroverb reissue together. And John was so inspired by that tone that he went home and tried to recreate it in that environment. John has been my source on how to make a stomp sound great for a long time. I've been relying on him for years, really. He's taken to calling me, I think he refers to me as OF. You'll have to figure that out. I'm sure you guys can do the math on that, what that means, because I'm always asking him a tech question, which is very funny because I had a tech job for 30 years. We got BV Ninja here today, moderating for us. There's no one better than BV, as I've said many times before. I'm honored to have him modding for us here. Watch for his answers in the chat. If we don't know something, we toss it to BV, as you guys do as well, and that's fantastic. A lot of people chiming in here. It's great. A lot of folks that we recognize. Remember, if you have questions or comments for Jeff, where I throw the @5 Watt World in the front, it'll pop up in my chat stream as in bright orange. I'll try to do the best I can. And I'm still working on the short history of the Mosrite guitars, which is why I got 2 live streams in a row, as I'm still writing that script, trying to pull it together. And I'm hoping to have that for us in the very near future. I've been a little disappointed. I'm going to look for some input from you guys. I am a little disappointed in the performance of the last couple of Guitars of videos. So I'm kind of spending some time this week. That's why we're here on live again. Is I'm spending some time thinking about sort of the future of the channel and what kind of stuff to make that still has this history theme, but emphasizes the music. I have a couple of ideas that I've been working on for a while that have to do with the old minimalism, essentialism stuff, along with, the bar rig of the future. And we'll touch on that here. So enough of me mumbling on. Everybody's chiming in over here. So let me get Jeff out of the green room. Oh, there he is. Caught it.
You do a spit take.
Let me just back that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff, like me, Jeff is sitting at his work computer. This is where
Mhm.
Jeff does everything there.
I do.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, Jeffrey.
Oh man, thanks for having me as always. And hey everybody, what's going on? A lot of familiar faces.
There you go. Yeah, you've seen him in the stream.
Yeah, yeah.
You sound a little louder than me. I don't. Who knows what they hear?
I can turn me down.
You can slightly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have that ability.
What do people think? Heard Nick Granville. Yeah, a lot of people. I recognize lots of folks. And Jason.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah, that's a
Better. Okay, yeah. Let me know. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. I felt like from the chat early on, Panda was talking about how could we do B5 watt world without an amp. I still have one 5 watter that I built with Dan Lurie. Yeah, Danny says turn Keith up. How about that? We'll turn that up.
Turn me down. I turned down.
Yeah, there you go.
Tough thing is you can never really check these things ahead of time, which is
well, you can't tell what's out in the world because we're hearing, our own voice in the room, and then you're
as usual, Jeff. Perfection.
Who said that?
That was Lip Tech 1. And then the guitars of Jeff McErlain would be a hit video, no doubt. That's pretty funny.
JL Trem, John says Jeff was loud. See,
yeah.
John's.
Okay. I think it's okay now.
Yeah, Pierhead Jump. Hey, Keith, how you doing, man? Keith is a good friend of the channel, longtime friend of the channel. Avi Eckhart from Paris. Bonsoir there, Avi. Okay, so today I asked Jeff because we have two very different perspectives on the state of using an amplifier, an actual amplifier and speaker in a room. Though I had a standing jazz gig from 97 to 2001, a weekly, which, would be something that any jazzer would kill for. Although the sad thing is, I think that this standing sort of hope for money is probably, dinner and $50 a man hasn't changed since I did that gig. No, it's the same, right? And I remember people coming up from New York at the time going, so you guys here every Thursday? Yeah, we're every Thursday. What's it like a 2-hour, late dinner? Yeah. Wow, I'd love to have something like that in New York. I was like, wow. Okay. Anyway, on that gig, I used a first generation Hot Rod Deluxe. I had a pair of them.
On like,
yeah, 2.
Like as low as you could possibly.
Right, exactly.
They're loud amps. Yeah.
They are really loud. Yeah. Right. Yep. But now I'm an at-home guitar player. So I am in the group here. What are they making you laugh, Jeff?
Yeah, somebody put at 9-volt world.
Bill Sanders says now it's a no watt world. I like that. I like the ring of that. I think Bill, I think that's a t-shirt to come. The no watt world. Yeah. I like the
a good commentator. The bane of the guitarist is you're too loud. There's that old joke of like when you're walking in into a club with an amp, they're like, whoa, turn down.
So that's me. I'm a living room guy, and I'll talk about my own living room sort of rigs these days. Jeffrey, on the other hand, I sent him this in advance, and he said that I skipped one of his big gigging credits, of course, out on the road with Mr. 100 Watt himself, Robin Ford, playing on the same stage with probably the most valuable amplifier on the planet. On 100, even though it has a 50 watt switch, which is never used, right?
No. And that's the Dumble.
It is the Dumble.
The Dumble.
Yeah. Is it when you have to tell me when it's time to run the clip? We have a clip from Jeff talking about a spoof. It is a spoof clip about Dumbles. Why don't we come back to it? We'll save it.
All right.
It's so good. We're going to save it. We're going to save it a little bit. And we use it as a teaser. We'll bring everybody in. Nick Granville's is a jazz guy. He's saying 2 amps on a jazz gig. Yeah, Nick, I started that with a pair of Hot Rod Deluxes thinking I'd, Metheny my way with a CS2 chorus pedal. And then I think I carried them. It rapidly declined into one trip from the car,
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. I get lazy fast. Yeah.
Right. Went from a big fat jazz box to playing a Parker with 11s on it, flat wounds and I did for 5 years. It was a great jazz guitar. Anyway, so Jeff, of course, is out there with his own band gigging with Two Rocks, and Jeff's all set up today to talk Two Rock and FM and Fractal. And he tours with Europe, and he's going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. Furthermore, he has just lots of friends that do the same thing. That are, David Grissom, who's been here before, Matt Schofield, who we're going to try to have on. I'll try to think of something we could talk to Matt about that he's cheery about. He's a gray old British soul, my friend Matthew. Right?
He's been through a lot.
He has. I mean,
he's been in the trenches his whole life, so I understand where a lot of this comes.
He's been a blues musician his whole life.
Devoted, full on, and it's a rough business.
Yeah,
Little
it is.
shop, yeah.
It is a tough business. It is a tough business. So the question of the day is, do you still need an amp? And of course, the answer is that depends. Somebody put that like in the comments yesterday when I put the video up. Literally, while I was putting up the video, somebody went in the comments and wrote, "Well, the answer is that depends." So I deleted it. No, I'm kidding. So, and along this line, go watch my "How many amps do you need?" because I touch on a number of these things there, but I didn't have Jeff along for the party, and so that's why we're here today. All right. So let's do this by categories. I'm gonna walk through categories, and we'll see which of us talks over the other one the most. We're gonna do at home digital, software or modeler, at home hybrid, at home amp and guitar, live digital, and I'll talk about my bar rig of the future ideas, live amp, and live hybrid. What did I leave out, Jeff?
I lost count. Yeah.
Say what?
I think I lost count. I wasn't paying attention.
you were reading the comments because there you go.
In my own world, you know.
Book Davey says, "Hi, Watt World." That's probably a copyright issue.
Yeah. Well,
there you go. Okay.
All right.
Enough of this history of Parker guitars. I love my 90s predefined Fly Deluxe. Predefined. What does that mean, Ryan? Anyway, that's pretty funny. So let's get started at home, and probably it's a nice thing to do to start off with the quiz. So Jeff, before we got started, I asked Jeff if how much work it would be to be set up so that he could go fractal or quickly switch to a 2-rock through an aux box. And he literally, I said I was going to have him do it again. He literally turned around and went, click, click. Okay, I'm ready to go.
I have it all dialed in.
He's an absolute professional. So Jeff is going to play. This is not what this video really is about, but we just need to get this out of the way. Jeff is going to play and the 2 different cables. And then I want you all to vote which you think is a 2-rock and which is the Fractal FM3. All right. So Jeff's going to do, this is tone 1. There we go.
Okay. Of course, always the cable falls on the ground, you know.
Okay, so I want everybody to vote which one is the amp, 1 or 2, A or B. I feel like I'm at the optometrist. 1 better, worse, or about the same? 1 or 2? 1 or 2? Okay, keep voting, people. Somebody, Bebe wanted us to remember to do laptop / studio monitors. Whoa, look at everybody go.
Wow.
What are you guys listening?
You're like 1, 2, what? Wait, which one's the? Okay, yeah.
So,
okay.
So you remember you're voting on which is the amp and which is the fractal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Is the amp. 1 is the amp, and 2 is the 1 is the fractal, 2 is the amp. We're talking. Okay. Wow. So it's.
You hadn't told him, Jeff.
I haven't told. No, I haven't told him. No, I didn't tell him at all. I'm saying I forget which one.
Oh, you're reminding yourself, but you're telling him. Yeah.
No. I wasn't telling him. No, I was going like, okay, which one did we say was the amp?
Yeah, that's right. I said, just tell us which one is the amp. Which one is the rock, boys and girls?
Yeah. No, I didn't give it away.
Everybody voted? Everybody that wants to vote voted? I can't really do a count, but I think
it's pretty split, actually.
I was going to say, it is pretty fair to say that it's split. Although there are a lot of votes for number 2 here. David Barber says number 1 sounded better, so I hope that's the amp.
Yeah.
Says the guy with a pedal company.
What's the prize? My amp collection.
That's right. No, I mean, and David has amazing ears. That's one of the reasons I was saying I got to get David on.
Should we do it one more time?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go again. And
All right.
then if anybody wants to change their votes, they can. So you're going back to number 1.
This is number 1.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Perry just dropped into the stream. He says, "What he missed, Perry? We are doing a demo, and you're going to vote on which one you think is the amp." He just played 1, and now he's going to play number 2 set up, and you're supposed to tell me what you think it is. People are voting already. Okay, here's the big reveal, boys and girls. And let me just be clear. This is not, this was never designed to be the whole point. Right. This was designed to prove what it seems to have done, which is depending on your monitors, depending on your listening setup, your telephone, your earbuds, whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm not looking to amp shame anybody here. I'm not looking to ear shame anybody, but the number 1 rig that Jeff played through is
the Fractal.
Oh, I thought you did the other way around.
That's what you thought. No, number 2 is the 2-Rock. Number 1 is the Fractal.
So number 1 was the Fractal, and number 2 was the 2-Rock. And then when we were talking before we went live, you quickly did some math, and you went, mm-hmm. Okay, one rig is $7,000, and one rig is it's like $1,000.
$1,000.
Yeah. All right.
There are many things to think of. One, we're also hearing the aux, and then trying to find the right cabs and things like that, So it's interesting. So, what we're still hearing, we're not talking about a gig, but we're talking about at home, like a digital representation of a tube amplifier through, a fake cabinet. So which one is more like either of the two, So it's pretty funny.
It's not like you have a 57 and a 121 on a cabinet in your house in Brooklyn, picking up the construction in the street while we do this video, which is why you have the aux box. So your point is that even the 2-Rock rig is a hybrid rig.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is an important point. So, and tell just real quickly, Jeff, you were saying that, clean tones are easier to get on in this kind of environment. Talk about that briefly.
Yeah, there's a few things that we go through. Like, I was not trying to match the sound of my 2-Rock when I played to the Fractal. The Fractal, that was a JTM 45, which is one of my favorite amps anyway, through like a Marshall 412 cabinet. The 2-Rock is more of a Dumble kind of circuit. I put it through a 412 G, a greenback cabinet in the aux.
Right.
With a ribbon mic and a 421, what I would normally like to use in the studio. So, the funny thing is, like, if I tried to, I'm trying to match the two. I'm not trying to tone match them at all. Like, so the Fractal doesn't really do that. It's not like the Kemper or the Quad Cortex. And I don't really care as long as it sounds good to me, So, they both feel great. That's the coolest thing. There's not something that I'm playing the 2-Rock and going, oh, this feels significantly better than the Fractal does. And it's the FM3, which I have.
Anna was asking.
Yep. Yeah. There's all these levels to it. But one thing that when people say to me, like, oh, why would you, when I started using the Fractal a lot, people are like, oh, you're going to get rid of your amps. I'm like, no, of course not. Why would I do that? Mm-hmm. Or are you going to get rid of your the other way around. Like, you're not going to stop using the fractal because you have an aux. And I'm like, no, because they're all different tools. But in terms of the simplicity and the cost ratio, if a lot of what we're talking about is when I'm at home, which is most of the time, and most of the videos you hear me do on my internet channel, and these live things, very often they're the fractal. And one thing you asked your specific question is the T-Rock has an amazing clean tone. These amps are known for their. I have not achieved the equivalent clean tone using the aux with the T-Rocks. You know what I mean? There's just something. There's experiential stuff of being in the room. So when I go to there's something odd about T-Rocks and the aux. Anyway, I've discovered. Yeah, I think the T-Rocks are so hi-fi. I find like if I use like a simpler amplifier, like a less, my Marshall sounds pretty good. Even the clean tone sounds pretty nice to the aux. But when I'm getting as the fractal, when I dial in like a super reverb, I'm like, oh, that's great. So if you guys go over my channel, there's me playing this triad video, the pros. I'm doing kind of this strat tone with kind of like a wicked game sort of thing. That's
nice. Nice plug segue. That was professionally done.
Thank you.
I like that.
That's the fractal. People are like, oh, is that the T-Rock? What amp was that? Is that a deluxe? No, it was the fractal. It was just a super reverb with their reverb.
Right. And I'll throw something on the table to help folks who maybe feeling like they got it wrong. It could well be that they're reacting to the fact that one is a Marshall JTM 45 model and the other one's more of a Dumbly. I mean, they're very different.
Exactly.
Amps. Like you said, you're not tone matching here. So it could be that your response is like, oh, well, to me, electric guitar sounds like a Marshall. Oh, no, electric guitar to me sounds like.
Right. So the point of all of this is that like looked like it was fairly split. And then, had I spent more time even trying to tone match, you might be reacting to those things. But the point that I've discovered, and when I've done work for people and I send them a file like, oh man, what are you using? What mic's you using? I'm like, oh, I've got a 421. It's a fractal, and nobody has ever said, something sounds kind of artificial about that. Never. Right. Yeah.
Well, and I'll go all the way back because it's really one of the thing that Bebe reminded us of. When you and I very first met, and or maybe it was right before we met, and I would watch your videos or a live stream that you would do. This is really, it's a while ago. I'd say, man, you sound great. And you were like, yeah, I'm using the software.
Yeah.
And you were using what back then?
Two different things. I have the Apollo Twin stuff. So I was using, one of the amps that I really liked from them was the Friedman Small Box. The Friedman Dirty Shirley was pretty nice sounding.
Yeah.
And the other one, which is very inexpensive, is S-Gear by Scuffum Amps. I think it's like 140.
Oh, yeah.
It's great. And I've still used that. And a lot of my friends, like if I'm just traveling with a computer and an interface, I'll sometimes plug into that. So S-Gear is really inexpensive. There's so many of them. There's the Line 6 native stuff is really good sounding. I mean, there's so many of them. What are the other companies? Amplitube. There's Angus Clark, right? Angus is a big fan of S-Gear, especially when he's on the road. Yeah. It just sounds great. They all sound really good. And one thing we have to remember too is many of these things are in context.
Yeah. Right.
Now, I could keep on talking, so sorry.
Well, I was just going to jump in and David Barber grabbed the life raft that the preserver that I threw out into the water and he said number one sounded better, and it turns out it's the model of his very favorite amp of all time, so close enough. The verisimilitude is winning.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent.
I love David.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you spent years doing that for your live stuff, and now you're using the fractal.
Or the accent sometimes, depending.
Yeah. But the fact is, sitting in that room, both of those rigs were coming back at you from your speakers, right?
So my studio monitors come into play as well.
Right. And Jeff and I joke that we have like the world's cheapest, oldest studio monitors. The funny thing is we have the same ones. We both have a pair of M Audio BX5As.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're just completely used to them, and which is always the thing. So
yeah.
C. Barry says, Jeff, what's your current interface?
The Apollo Twin X, like the latest Duo, the latest Apollo Twin. It's the Duo, the quad or whatever they call it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we've touched on the software thing. We could actually spend an hour on any one of these categories. And I think that there's clearly that's some place that people are going. one of the things that's true in both of these, and we're going to touch on it both in all the categories, really the at home versus live, is people's attachment to knobs. We're going to come back to that. But in a software world, I personally find, finding my way around like my Stomp and doing it on screen, I just as soon do it on screen.
That's the way I program my Fractal as well.
Yeah. Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because there is interface, but I'm terrible with that.
Right.
Like, because then you're scrolling through things, and they have a beautiful layout. Line 6 does as well. These companies that make it very simple. And by the way, Angus is in the chat, and Angus plays arenas with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra on a Fractal, so he might want to chime in on all that as well. But so I guess the question is, when would you use one or two? And this is where the big thing comes into play. At home, I primarily, because I live in Brooklyn and I got a family, I want to play at night. I'm primarily using my Fractal for practicing and just playing, because I can control the volume. So here's the difference. This is a big thing. If we're talking about amp versus a modeler is supposed to sound like a record, right? Your modeler is reproducing, for the most part. There's other ways to run this, but generally speaking, if you're plugging your Fractal or your Stomp into a flat response speaker or the PA, you're trying to reproduce a mic'd amplifier sound from a record, right? So that's going to have a different sort of effect. And so at home, that's kind of what I'm going for, especially at night. It just feels great and it sounds great. It's like, oh, it sounds like a really well mic'd amplifier in the other room. But if it's the tube amp, this is 40 watts, this is 100 watts, and the other one's over there's 35. My super lead's 100 watts. Like, frankly, at the volume I'm playing at right now, none of them sound very good. I'm always kind of futzing, going like, oh man, everything sounds like crap. And you go, oh, turn it up a little bit, like, oh, there it is. Because they're not designed.
You had that experience recently where everything you touched sounded like crap, and you're like, oh, maybe it's just me. Oh wait, let me try turning my amplifier on. From 2 to 3, and all of a sudden it's
physics
glorious.
takes into play, and all these things. So that's really an important thing to think about. So for instance, I've got a tour like in a year, I told you, but the last tour I did in the Czech Republic, it was very mixed size rooms, and a lot of the rooms were smaller or jazzier, and I'm used to playing a little louder, and the other guys were more jazz based guys, and they were they were like, man, does it have to be that loud? I'm like, yes, it does. It's a rock gig. So then they cut the excuse me.
Bless you.
The idea that so what I might try to do, but I was battling I had a hot rod, and I was using my Kingsley into the preamp, and it sounded great. Sometimes it wasn't the pedal, but it was so loud at times. And not really, because the keyboard player was going direct because he's playing keyboards. And the bass player had really low amp wattage on stage, and he's done a lot of jazz gigs. And so he was kind of going direct as bass amps normally do. And the only guy who really had stage volume for real would be the drummer and me.
Right.
So it became just a real problem turning the amp around. I'm putting, a case in front of the guitar amp, and it's not even that loud. It was just some of the places we're playing. So this next tour, the keyboard player's like, do you think you would try digital? And I'm going to, for this reason, and I would never do, and John Cordy did a video on this. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
Digital's great. I would never do a digital if the other guitar player had a real amp, though, because they're always going to kill you. They're always, if you're playing a bar and you've got your Fractal and you're plugging into the front of the house and you're just setting up and you're like, okay, it's a different room tonight, no sound guy kind of thing, or I'm always bringing an amp because I always have complete chart control over the amplifier. Open back speaker's going to fill the room in a way that a little PA sort of speaker is not going to. If you're the only guitar player, or in the case of someone like Angus right here, and you're playing an arena and you're on top of a riser 1,000 feet off the stage with smoke and flames and
so comfortable up there. Yeah, on the end of the
exactly right. Yeah, with in-ears, then your amp isn't even on the stage. You're not even going to hear your amp. So something like a Fractal is much easier and much more expensive. Much less expensive for any of these touring companies. Metallica, it's all Fractal. Like, a lot of bands that you hear that you think is real amps are not real amps. And, or maybe they have real amps on stage and the Fractal is actually what you're hearing coming out of the house.
Right. I remember when when Meshuggah went to all fractals, and they basically said we can't make the sounds that we created on the record with amps on stage. We just can't.
And it costs a lot of money to move your amps. And so I'm going to give that a whirl. I might be completely miserable, but everybody else is sort of direct on this gig.
Yeah. And you're the guitar player. It's your gig too. So,
and so if I've dialed this in really well and I've got to a point, then I think it might be something I can deal with. If there's another guitar player who was not using this, then I would not go that way. I would use an amp.
Yeah. All right. Well, since you leapt into the second half of the show, I'm gonna do my ish ad, and then we're gonna run your clip about modelers to bring it back home, because your testimonial is important. I see you finished your cocktail. You're gonna have to get something while we run that. So let me do my ad style here. Midstream spot is the 5 Watt World live stream is brought to you with the support of the boys at Ish Guitars. Ish stocks a carefully curated set of brands, including PRS, Dingwall, Martin Spector, Strandberg, Music Man, Gretsch, Federa, Heritage Ritter, Ibanez Taylor, Vox, and Victory. You probably noticed a number of my favorites in there, just to name a few. Since opening in 2014, Ish has grown to be one of the biggest PRS private stock and wood library dealers in the world. They also deal in vintage pieces and have had a 60 Les Paul and a 56 Strat. My understanding is the 56 Strat is still there. I say that every time I do a live stream. So one of these days, it's not going to be true, where God knows when people are watching this. That's a very cool guitar, by the way. It's got all that wear. It looks so much like a 56 Strat. The shop excels in working with manufacturers to carry out limited runs. It's actually one of their favorite things to do. Unique woods, features, colors. Folks that follow me on Instagram have probably seen the wood library DGT that I have. The one on Jeff's lap didn't come from Ish, but it's also, I think it's got to be from the same run. The neck, etc. I mean, oh my God, the neck on that guitar. See?
Guitar porn.
Jeff had to buy it, so I didn't buy it. Most importantly, the shop is run by and for musicians. Anyone that's answering the phone there plays guitar, bass, or both. It's not an exaggeration to say. I actually was texting back and forth with Jesse Wilson, the owner of Ish, the other day. He was actually being kind of nice guy and checking in on me since my dog passed away last month. And he's a real dog guy. And I said, well, come on, Jesse. I always say on the live streams that I moved here to work with Ish, and dude, you are Ish. He's like, oh, come on. You're making me all misty. So anyway, I want to thank Ish for their support of the live stream. All right. So let's go back and talk in general terms about at-home hybrid. This clip I'm going to run of Jeff is a spoof that he did in reaction to a video clip that's going around that I actually didn't find on YouTube. Jeff shared it with me through a good friend of both of ours who owns a Dumble and plays a Dumble, in bar gigs and stuff, which I think is fantastic that there's people out there gigging a Dumble at a bar gig. And it was a clip of Santana talking about how he's a Dumble musician and how there's a spiritual
in a very Santana way. Yes.
In a very Santana, I still live in the Bay Area kind of way. So I'm going to run the clip of
Especially
Jeff.
This is going online.
Sorry. You just realized that this is going everywhere. Okay, Jeff. Well, that's why you have to have the big setup. And if you really hate it, I'll go in. I'll let. No, I won't.
All right.
I won't. Here we go.
Be an entirely line 6 musician. I find that when plugging straight into this, I make a spiritual connection with the DSP chips in a way that nothing has really touched me before. It's splendiferous, the effect that it has when the sonic frequenciosities produced by the people at line 6. I love it. I have even taken the plastic off of it. This is everything to me. Well, the whole point of that was Santana was being very Santana, and we love him for that. That talking about the tonal responses of a Dumble. He's a Dumble musician, and Dumbles are very he used a few words that I don't think exist. And I'm not looking. When you play a really great amp,
Sure,
there's something going on for sure. So I was just having fun because nobody can afford a Dumble. It's like it's the greatest amp in the world that nobody else can afford. So that's the funny thing about it was you can talk about that, but it's a club of how many people, So
yeah.
But that was all in good natured ribbon, of my friend who owns a Dumble
who
loved it. Yeah.
My favorite part was who it got sent to later in the day.
Oh yeah, he sent it to Joe Bonamassa, and Joe laughed about it. Yeah. They have a club, those guys.
That's right. While I'm thinking of it, and we're talking about Dumbles, etc., everybody should go watch. The guys at Premier Guitar just did a rig rundown with Kenny Wayne Shepherd, where he's got 3 rebuilt, really gutted and completely built Dumbles in his rig. And he was talking about, he talks about having Dumbles on the road and traveling with amps, etc. So very germane to today's topic. BV wanted to know if the 56 pickups were original and the wiring pots, etc. I'm hesitant to say. My memory is that they had to have the pickups rewound and they were sent to Ron Ellis for that purpose. But I'm sorry. So I apologize. It's actually been a couple of months. And when I go in there, I try not, I mean, it's bad enough when I go in that I occasionally come back out with a guitar to when I go see him. I actually only get in there every once in a while. So, all right. So let's go back to some of these categories. So we talked about software on the computer. I think we talked about modelers. One of the combinations that at home, one of the combinations I do quite often is I've got an HX effects or an HX, I should say, Stomp XL. I've mostly used the XL now. It's got the extra buttons, and that'll be sitting in front of, most of the time out there right now is a Catalyst 60, a Line 6 Catalyst 60. But in the last 2 months, it's been sitting in front of a Princeton Tone Master. It's been sitting in front of Bill Sanderson was kind enough to sell me back my FYD amps GA40 clone from my 1958 GA40 clone with old parts, etc. So that's a hybrid rig. And then basically people ask me all the time when I put it on Instagram, I'm basically using it as a pedal board. And so it's all this digital between me and sometimes a really incredibly beautiful, tube circuit. So that's the hybrid thing. And I think that makes sense. And I've used an HX effects in a very similar way. So I think that works too. Again, then I think the next step is the obvious thing. And I hope we still have David Barber here, because the reality is, the Panda is saying UA Dream, and that's right to the let's turn a knob.
Yeah.
So, right. And you were telling me, Jeff, that, whether at home or on the road, there's a real appeal for that going in that direction. Yeah.
The reason why is, I mean, I look like I might be technically adept, but
you do?
With all the stuff, everything I've done, like all this online, is kind of kicking and screaming. You know what I mean? So there's the fractal. Some of these things are as easy as they can get, but there's still menus that you have to go through. And if you go on a gig, you're like, oh, it's a little bassy. On an amp, you just go. You just lean over, turn on the bass, or a pedal, you turn on the bass. Oh, there's too much reverb. Hold on. Or if you're on the actual gig, you're like, oh man, it's kind of wet. And then you're like, scrolling. And that's what would happen to me, because
spinning.
Spin. Like, there are ways, no matter how, in my experience, there's going to be guys who are totally on top of this stuff. That's cool. I'm talking about me, who is really an amp and pedal guy, for the most part, that having to get deep into any kind of thing that has a menu that will require me on the fly to know the inside of the thing really, really quickly, that's kind of problematic. Mm-hmm. Especially for me, in a way, as primarily like a guy who plays improvised music, the pedals are part of the improvisation at times. Like, maybe I wanted to suddenly change the speed of my univibe, or flip it in the middle of the song to one thing to the other. So I have to plan that all out ahead with a unit, and there's going to be taps. Now you can work all these things out, but I just love on my pedal board, which is over there, I'm going to just click on the delay, and here's my tap button. You know what I mean? It's all simple. Yeah. So now, if you're in the case of like Angus, where your patches are being changed by somebody else, and it's a rehearsed thing. It's not like we're going into a funk section now. Oh, cool. All right. Done. This delay is not right. And then I just find I'm so comfortable with pedals that's one of the things that make it an issue for me. So where these pedals like the Dream and that I like come in, this is like these standalone units that have, they're like an amp, bass, middle, treble, reverb, and you can start to dial that in, and that replaces your amplifier. So I'm looking at something like that, because that might be a little simpler. Mm-hmm. It's the sound good. I think the Fractal sounds amazing. I'm super happy with it. If I plugged in every gig and sounded like I did when I played Amp 1, I would be pretty happy. Yeah. But So, this is just the whole, these things become a bit of a rabbit hole at times if you're, and you have to have the mindset for it. And I think sometimes for me, here's the thing. I don't have a lot of time to rehearse, say, with the band before you go on the road. When we got to, it was a European band, for instance, you got to got to Czech Republic, you're traveling for 24 freaking hours, you're exhausted. You have a rehearsal with, 3 hours of sleep, and then you gig every single night in a different bar, in a different club or bar. So me sitting there going, hold on, can we just, and then you go to a different room, and then the bass response is going to be completely different. So, the Bushwalk saying that the fractal has too many options. They all do.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing I think about the fractal, I have to say, if you just and I'm not trying to sell, fractal, it's just my experience, is they have a bunch of great presets, and very often, as they recommend, and a lot of these companies do this, you're like, oh, one's called Hell's Glockenspiels, Hell's Bells. It's, you plug into, you're like, kind of sounds like the AC/DC. And then you're like, oh, it's maybe too much reverb. Okay, then you just use that as your building block. You just you tailor it. So they've done a really good job with that, as opposed to sometimes other companies, like, you try like a Boss multi effects pedal, you turn it on, it's like,
right. Well, and even like the HX Stomp presets that they ship, I periodically talk to the guys at Line 6, and I'm like, you should just buy John's, presets.
Yeah.
Yeah, John always makes his rig sound better than Jeff and I can make his preset sound, but that's a different thing altogether. But I had a question. Bill Sanderson asked earlier my opinion on the Stomp XL versus a full Helix. For me, I just don't need that many buttons, and as that you'd have on a full Helix, and I don't need all the different switching and all the kind of stuff that it'll give you. I don't even need a volume pedal. I don't need a wah. That's not me. So the interesting thing was that Cordy actually also did a video recently. This is about the John Cordy hour. John did a video recently. Well, he makes 2 videos a day, so it's done one everything. He made a video where he basically said his gigging preset is a single amp. And the reason he does that is, like, in a live situation, if I want it to sound like I'm playing an amplifier with a band, I don't want my amp to change out, every tune. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to say, because he's like, I'm building a setup where this is what it is. And I think that's a really interesting, we were talking about function bands. That's the British term for, or a cover band. He would go that direction is really interesting, because he has so much more power on the floor. And then the last thing I'll add to that is, when I interviewed Per Nilsson recently, who's in a metal band, but also toured with Meshuggah when he used fractals, he's touring with an XL.
Yeah.
That's
really?
it. Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
It depends on the genre of music as well. I've found that, like, if you're playing in a heavy metal thing where it's largely gain, and you have the crystal clean tones, those are things that I find to be a little, that modeling units have always been very, very good at, like the heavy sounds, I feel like. Yeah. I don't play a lot, but it was always those in-between sounds that I felt that the modeling units felt a little lifeless, until this latest fractal stuff. Yeah. And I haven't played a quad cortex. Some of my friends love them. Yeah. Even the new upgrades on the Line 6 stuff, they feel and sound much better to me, But back to John's thing, like, everything everybody hears, like, it's that JTM 45, one of my favorite amps of all time. And I just add pedals and effects to it. And it's just the same amp pretty much for everything, because I would never think about changing amps on a gig. It's not the way right.
That's basically what John was saying.
Yeah,
right.
That's the same way. Yeah. So it's the way I would run it. Like, my T-Rock would be everything, or my Marshall, and I just plan accordingly.
Right stuff in front of it.
There was a comment earlier on. Somebody said, you do need the acoustic volume of your amplifier to keep up with the acoustic volume of your drummer. Absolutely, I'm in total agreement with that. So when I say I want to go through PA, maybe coming up, I would have to have a speaker monitor behind me, like an amplifier. But I can have much more control over what I hear and what goes shooting out onto the house. And as long as I compete with the drummer, and he can play like a real drummer for the music that I write and play, then I'm cool with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Ben Fletcher's here. Ben lives in Cornwall, out near John. Great slide player, but he should check out his channel. He doesn't do a ton of videos, but I really love Ben's playing. He does a lot of pub gigs, ton of like small blues pub gigs, actually plays bass upright as well. And he says I actually like the feel of playing an IR out of the back of a PA. I don't enjoy the sound coming off the front of a speaker. I always face them away from me anyway. So he's kind of splashing it around the room.
Well, I don't like standing right in front of any amp either.
Right.
Like, I like standing off to the side of any of my amps because you're getting that full on, especially like with Marshalls, you get that, that thing blowing right at you and you get the high end. And that's why you stand off to the side and torture everyone else.
Right. Pointed at the people in the front row.
It's like Jakey Lee has his 2412 facing on angles like this, like, like this. And he stands in the middle. And he's like, oh, the rest of the guys got to deal with it.
Good luck to them. Good luck to them.
Yeah.
A Fat Philosopher is there. Shane in Japan. Hey, Shane. Thanks for getting up. That's really early in Japan, boys and girls. Yeah. Shane is a very dedicated fan of 5-Watt World. Although I always think of him as being my fan of pointy guitars. I like that about Shane. He's a metal guy, loves green guitars. I love it.
Cool.
He lives in the right place. Ben's laughing because we gave him his big moment there. Anyway, so we've touched on you jumped into the future and talked about when you probably would use your FM3 out on the road. And last time you went with a pedal board which had a tube preamp on it. Are you looking to do a smaller pedal board? You're looking for a lighter solution?
Well, no, not necessarily. I was just looking for one where you're renting gear. All these tours are incredibly low budget, right. And you're renting the amp, and then the sound, the size of the rooms change dramatically. The guys in the band who I loved playing with, it's just a different concept. And some of these rooms, like we played a lot of like some theaters that were really big, but they were designed for, not vocals. I mean, not amplified, you people singing like, or plays. And suddenly you turn on a guitar and it's like, wow, and I'm not even that loud. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm on like 2. And I did the whole effect loop volume thing. Like I'm putting the amp to the effect. And just to get at that certain spot was starting to be very directional. And it was just, every day was an adventure in me trying to get my guitar to not kill people. And it wasn't even that loud. So, and also, you have to rent the amp that cuts down on the things and renting. And then what are you going to get? You want to rent this amp. You got a hot rod to build. Not my favorite amp with the speakers that are stock. You know what I mean? Like there's all these things and then you're just futzing around. So I would like to have something that's a little bit more consistent. But as people were saying, you do ultimately need both. It all depends on the gig. But if you're at home and you're just playing for fun and you're not really, the majority of my playing and practicing is done on the Fractal, just because even I got these great amps, but it's like, you're living in New York City and owning a Ferrari. Sometimes you're like, okay, 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, potholes, so sometimes my Honda fits the car for New York,
Right. Yeah. Right. Ivan Romenko says, can you lean back and not fall because the 412 is there holding you up? He said he's asking for a friend. I think I love Ivan. He cracks me up. I want to make sure I didn't miss any questions here. I think that your point was a very good one about the different genres. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And also I think, touring for everybody has gotten to be so low rent.
Yeah.
It's just, that's just a thing. Perry and I had a long conversation about this earlier today. And it really is just, I think it really comes down to for him to back to knobs. And, for me, that's the catalyst. I'm always talking to the guys at Line 6 about what the upgrade path is for something like that, because here you've got, a set number of models, you've got a guitar speaker, and I've actually swapped out the speaker in a Catalyst 12 with a 112 to like a Neo Creamback. I put it back to the original one. It does the variety of things. It does a great job with that. And you've got all the knobs. You're back to knobs. And the amp is a fairly inexpensive affair, and I don't know as I would feel comfortable gigging it. Certainly not hauling it in and out all the time. I've heard some rough stories about, it's a $400 amp and it acts that way. So yeah. So let's see.
David Barber had a question.
David says, what do you think of true boost pedals with modeling? I feel like hitting the front of a modeler rarely works as well as a tube amp. Other than that, I like a single amp model with a pedal board. It sounds like he's talking about a Tone Master to me.
I can plug in a boost, stick it in front.
You want to put an analog boost in front of your Fractal? Why we
like that? Yeah,
we get people to talk among themselves?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay. K Willis seconds that to Dan Barber. You're doing the full show and tell.
Yeah, well, it's the, I like this boost a lot. Hold on. All right, it's got to plug all this stuff in. Hold on.
David says he's talking about 10 dB plus boost players. Oh, people that have their boost on all the time, I guess is what he means. Is that what you mean, David? It's people that have it there. There's any number of guys who play. I'm very often, I've got, in my HX effects world, I've got in my stomp world, I've got a kinky boost on all the time. And actually running into the Catalyst, this is does it sound better or is it really just louder? So.
All right, well, here, sounds into the fractal. I got to say, it does take pedals really, really well, and the boost acts pretty close to what it would do in a natural amp. I know it sounds like I got like a, I'm selling fractal, but it's my experience with these guys. That's why I use them, because they take pedals really well. And then also I could put, I could dial in a boost at the end of my chain on the fractal that's digital. You're just pushing up the volume of the whole thing. Or I could put a boost anywhere in between. But yeah, so here's the boost off. And I'll all the way up.
Boosting it for solos, and sounds like that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it sounds pretty good. And there's all these kind of comments I want to kind of answer.
Please.
Yeah, the Fractal clone is good. They do a really good job. And the thing I love about Fractal is they put out updates like every month. Like they never stop. It's crazy. And they're all free. And you're like, wow, you really improved the feel of the amplifier. So I'm very impressed with the company. I'm very behind what they make.
And I know you and I both worked with Line 6. Same thing. And it's just like, I bought this piece of gear and it just keeps getting it better. And the change that they did in the way they structure their IRs, now I never run out of DSP. The kind of tones that I'm working with, I never run out of DSP anymore. So that's really good.
Well, also there's different price points. You know what I mean? If you're talking about an FM9 or a rack mount, there's a lot more expensive,
yeah,
than the Fractal. And the Line 6 and the Line 6, obviously listen to John Cordy, just sounds super great.
Yeah. He's got them both. Yeah.
David Barber sounds great. Might be an advantage over some other modelers that I've played. Yeah. That's why I've always leaned towards this one. It's the first one I invested. You know what it was? I've had students who had the earlier iterations of this, and they, I'd go over their place. Like, I got to come and check it out, and I'd play it. And I'm like, not really. Like, it doesn't feel good. It sounds okay, but it just doesn't interact with my hands. It's not very dynamic. And this latest version of the Fractal stuff, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And Jason Lockwood was over here one day. He's like, I don't know. He plugs it in and he was like, all right.
You're like, I give up.
Yeah, he's like, I give up. It just sounds great. And I'm like, yeah, it does. So,
yeah. But I agree with you. Somebody's early in the stream just said they just hate knobs. And you and I both said that we are editing on screen. So on the fly, on a date.
I wish I could show you my screen, but what it looks like. But there's the whole thing. So somebody just edited tinnitus is a bitch. I have tinnitus, and it's something I'm very, very cautious about. So we talk about the live amp on stage. Or you talk about Robin playing his Dumble, 100-watt Dumble. Part of my tinnitus, I think, is from playing with him. I've never been on a louder stage volume in my whole life, and I've played in metal bands, and this was just this clean Dumble with a Telecaster just taking your head off, So for me, these are things I really have to think about now too. I know Eric Johnson's dealing with it. Everybody, a lot of guys are dealing with it. So for me, I'd rather not do in-ears because I feel like the things are so close that I very rarely use any kind of headphones, if I can avoid it, just because I've got tinnitus, and it's horrible and I don't want it to get any worse. So I'm trying to keep my stage volume as low as I can to where it still feels like I'm actually playing the guitar in the way that I would like to. Mm-hmm. And I wear earplugs at all times, so, and it's just funny. Like the bass player in the band's like, well, why are you playing that loud on stage, but you're putting in earplugs? I'm like, cause of the cymbals,
right?
Like, cause of the drummer, like the drummer. The drummer's got to play right. And the cymbals are what gave me tinnitus, I'm convinced of, because it's worse in one ear than the other. And that's where the drums always are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
somebody threw in here a question. They wanted to know if you were, Jimmy Jams 1974 says, if you had to choose between a Princeton and a deluxe reverb for small to medium gigs and you knew you would be mic'd most of the time, which would you choose?
A Princeton with a 112.
There you go. The hedge. And actually, I just, the Princeton Tone Master that I have here, I got new cabs. You guys seen on Instagram. I got new cabs from Mojo Tone. And since I grew up in the 70s, to the extent that I ever grew up, but I was a kid in the 70s. I have purple with salt and pepper grill. And I got a 112 cab to experiment with 12-inch speakers with Princeton. But I agree with most people here who are saying it deluxe, especially if you over in the Tone Master world, the prices, the weight difference is negligible, absolutely negligible. Yeah.
And some people asking it earlier, how I feel about attenuators. I just don't really like them that much. I feel they just kind of make the amp feel different. I think attenuators only work to a certain extent. You lose a lot of your dynamics when you play. And one thing, I play, and we've had this discussion. There's a video with me, David Grissom, and Matt Schofield talking about how loud is too loud.
That's very good.
Thank you. And it's you got to keep up with the band. You got to keep with the drummer. You want to have headroom in your gear. And Matt is very similar to me. Like when you play Matt Schofield's rig, it's blisteringly. Well, he's loud. He's a loud cat. He doesn't think he is, but he plays loud. For me, too loud for me. So I can't handle it physically. It's just my ears can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
But I need it loud enough to having headroom, and then you can roll your volume and work the stuff yourself. I just want to have something that has headroom. I find sometimes, back to the initial thing, when you're using an attenuator on stage, you lose a lot of the headroom, the natural feeling headroom. If you go past like one or two clicks, I find it becomes a different thing. So there are other things like the Fryette Power Station where you're running your amp into that, and then you're turning that up, and people say it's great, but it's more gear to carry.
Yeah. Yeah. BV says that he votes for a Princeton with a 12-inch Alessandro. So there you go.
I love Princeton's with a 112. It's great, and they're small, great for New York.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't, I can't believe I'm going to say this because I haven't weighed mine yet with the Neo Creamback in it. I put the Neo in it, but I haven't weighed it yet. But it can't weigh 20 pounds. There's no way it weighs 20 pounds. Just don't weigh anything. So, all right. So I think we're coming up on the hour here. Let's see. Any last questions here? I always say that with trepidation when Perry's on the stream. I don't know if everybody saw, there was I got about 15 or 20 DMs that 5 Watt World was on a pizza video. Some guy has a huge pizza channel, was doing pizza places in Scottsdale, Arizona. And the guy's standing in the pizza place with a big 5 Watt World hoodie on. And I don't know who this guy is. Maybe if he sees this, he should reach out to me because the guy knows his pizza. The random guy standing there in the 5 Watt World hoodie, and 5 Watt Worlders, we know our pizza. So it just cracked me up. It's nice to see it out in the world. So
what's David Barber saying? I love the guitar players, and it keeps on jumping. Always said the cymbals, other guitar player, a crying baby, never our own loud. It is for me. It's always been the cymbals or the snare drum. Like it's those short, the high pitched things. And when I did like a hearing test, I have actually I have tinnitus. When I had a hearing test, the doctor's like, you actually have really good hearing for a professional musician. And I just happen to have the tinnitus or tinnitus, whatever you call it. But there's this thing like, and that drop is it the 4K maybe? It's like that cymbal range. That's where I have the notch, and that's that high frequency stuff. Yeah.
Baby's telling you that a particular in-ear company you should try to help with your tinnitus.
Okay. I'll check it out, man.
Yeah. So there were a couple of questions there, Frank, and then we're going to do Frank's top chat. Sean McCartney wants to know, is a Line 6 pod go through a Fender GTX modeler? Gets a ton of great sounds. Am I over the edge running a modeler into a modeler? Hey, I think you answered your own question with, I get a lot of great sounds. That's the answer. A lot of great sounds. People have asked me when I use the Catalyst with the HX XL, the Stomp XL, which is where am I running the amp? The answer is both. I run it from wherever. Frank Glad says, what's the verdict? Real amp, or can you handle an emulator? I think from if you go back to the top of the chat where everybody voted out of the box, there's lots of factors that we covered in the last hour, but the reality is people can't hear the difference. And Jeff is saying that, with the stuff that we had today, they both feel good. They've really kind of evolved to the point. Yeah, they really.
And it depends on what your gig is. Like I said, if I'm doing a gig where there's really no rehearsal or sound check, I'm really would love to just have a real amplifier, because I know how to handle that in any situation.
Right. Well, and we could spend just 2 minutes more going over here to say the reality is we could do another whole hour sometime about the whole nostalgia in the guitar playing business.
Oh yeah, sure.
Like Jeff showing up for a straight blues gig with that DGT on his lap, and he might not anyway because David's a good friend of his, and it's like this, but it's a killer guitar. It's a great guitar. Yeah, this individual one. But this whole idea of like what you can go play, which kind of gig is another. We'll have another day to play with that. But that plays into this too.
Well, I've got an old 100-watt super lead. Like it's insanely loud. Right. Like it's even though I put a master volume in it, like it's just one of those things where you're like, this is big, heavy, and really, really loud and aggressive, and like it's right. It's a thing. So should I bring that? And any club you walk into these days, you'd be like, what is that? You know what I mean? Like,
well, you said that the joke is what?
Oh yeah. When you walk in with the amp, even before you plug in, you got to turn down,
just because they see you have an amplifier.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to thank everybody for turning out. It's a good turnout today. And I want to thank Jeff, my good friend, Jeff. You're working on a tune already?
I'm working on a tune.
You were looking down and you were playing.
No, I'm just, noodling. The guitar in the hand. It's a bad habit of, I was looking at.
Right. All right. Well, Jeff's already moved on to noodling, so I'm going to put him back in the green room. Thanks again, Jeff.
What about in the green room? Never put baby in the green room. Don't put baby in the green.
Don't forget to tell everybody about that clip so that's everywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
So that tonight Jeff's DMs are absolutely chock-a-block full.
Of right.
There you go. Okay.
All right. See you guys. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. All right. And I'm going to sign off too. I want to remind everybody that today, we were brought to you by the help of Ish Guitars, and that the links are in the description. Thanks to BB. Thanks for Perry for turning out. Thanks to all you guys for turning out. Really, really sort of a hit parade of the folks that are regulars here, and a whole bunch of new people. Loved it. So I'm going to have Mr. Cordy on this clip. John gave me full permission to use this, by the way. I'm going to have him play us out using the piece that I used for the intro. Okay. All right. There we go.